The goal is to say, okay, I can maybe understand if you're in the West Bank or if you're in Gaza or if you're in some other place that, is difficult. You're dealing with the daily realities of life under those circumstances. You have Hamas, you have communal pressure. But if you're in the United States and you're bullied into silence in this unhelpful way, there's a threshold beyond which I start to lose my empathy. Or I don't want to use the word empathy, I'm all about empathy. I start to lose my patience, I should say, for you to not actually speak out, to not leverage your presence, your Western privilege. That is Western privilege, that we have a role and a duty to use, which is the privilege of freedom of speech, the privilege of having safety, the privilege of having our basic necessities met. So I absolutely work with this theme of silence and what it means and where it's coming from. As for your earlier question, I mean, no doubt, and as part of trying to be nuanced and be accurate, on the one hand, Hamas isn't straight up the Taliban or ISIS in the sense that they are not as fascistic as some of these Islamist terror groups. On the other hand, Hamas has adapted a more sophisticated, more gradual approach, to Islamize the society. And so one of the first things they did when they took over, I got political asylum in the United States when I was 17 years old. And the interview took place on June 14th, 2007, which is the very day that Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. And I was one of the first wave of Palestinians to seek asylum in the United States from Gaza because of their control. And so later in 2007, one of the first things they did, and I remember having a conversation with my dad about it, is, they came up with a rule that women, because Gaza has beaches, and so there are a lot of hookah lounges and water pipes and smoke hookah, whatever, everybody does it. Women cannot smoke hookah in public on the public beach, on the beaches, because that's just it's not civilized, that's the word they use. So it was almost immediate, and then they were they gauged some of the public pushback, and then they would roll it back, and then, years later, actually we don't want women to leave Gaza through the Rafah border crossing, the passenger crossing, without the approval of a guardian. And it started with a guardian for the young women, and then they tried to expand it, it has to be a brother or a father or a mahram. And then there was backlash, and then they were okay, fine, we're gonna push back, and then not really. Last year, right before October 7th, there was a young lady that I was helping in Gaza go to Bulgaria to a scholarship. And I was connecting her with another friend of mine who was teaching her English, and how do you go through the airport, and how do you transfer flights, just basics. She had never been out of Gaza. They met at a coffee shop, and Hamas's morality police, just like in Iran, came up to my friend, and she thankfully made it out of Gaza. They came up to my friend, and the female and the male guy, the young guys, and said, are you guys together? Are you married, And they were no, we're not married. And they were trying to ask him questions. Why are two single, unmarried? And it was 11 in the morning. And my friend, my male friend, actually escalated with them. And to de-escalate, they just decided to walk away. But take this, or how about violence? How about when the honor killings that Hamas not only doesn't prosecute those who commit those, but actually allows, for example, there are other things, for example, when it comes to splitting of the inheritance, because of the Islamic doctrine that Hamas adopts, they codified in the law that women get half of the inheritance of men, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So you have, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's threads upon threads of, entrapping women into this Islamization of the society. And Gaza, by the way, I know people find it, my family, I come from a pretty conservative Muslim family. My mom and siblings and sisters all cover up and wear the hijab. They're very committed and devout Muslims. But in the 70s, and even up into the early 80s, there are pictures of my aunts and my mom in skirts and in pants and in cuts and stuff like that. This started in the early to mid 1980s with the Mujamma Islami, the Islamic complex. And that's how you hear about Hamas having the social services. And it creeped up to political activism. Then it creeped up to militant activism. And so, unfortunately, the women of Palestine in general, but especially the women of Gaza, over, I would say, a 3.5-decade period, have suffered from the Islamization of society in a way that is inherently inconsistent with Palestinian culture and Palestinian values that were largely secular. Yes, Islam was a big part of the Palestinian national identity, but it was always as something that goes along with the national identity, not this like, oh, we are Muslims first and then Palestinians. And I'll conclude with this, just on this, and that's the thing about Hamas, is from the very beginning, they said it out in the open, mainline headlines. We don't care about Palestinian identity. We don't care about the Palestinian state. Mahmoud al-Zahar, and I was in Gaza when all these leaders, these disgusting leaders were there. He would say, oh, the Palestinian flag is like a little toothpick. He said that in 2007. It was only after the Palestinian National Project hit a roadblock that Hamas decided, all right, we're going to rebrand from pure Islamism to be national Islamists. And so that's why you started having the Nukhba, the Hamas's elite fighters that committed those horrendous atrocities on October 7th, when they actually still wore uniforms, not like what they do as cowards today. They started wearing, you saw all the Hamas fighters getting issued the Palestinian patch insignia to say that we are nationalist Islamists. So unfortunately, the women of Gaza, just like in a different way, have paid a heavy price.
Thank you so much. I've been told we need to wrap it up. So just very quickly, I want to go through every one of you. What should this film leave with us in terms of what we need to do, each one of us, what we need to do next to make sure that we're doing our part? But really leave it for one sentence. Go ahead.
I'm going to answer this question as a Jew, as an Israeli citizen, that what this film did for me, that reminded me that if I'm not the owner and the narrator of my own story, someone will take it from me, and it is my duty to continue to talk about this movie, to talk about these women, and to when I walk into a room of women's rights organizations, that I don't leave those two parts of me outside, and I insist that people look me in the face and recognize what my people are going through, what these women have gone through, and I'm not going to back down.
Well, I think everybody in this room can play a role. Education, as I said before, is the road to peace and understanding. There is denial not just of the women's rape issue, but there also is denial of everything. The posters being taken down, the whole experience, the whole Jewish-Israeli experience. So you have a role. You can educate, you can post, you can repost, and if you're on social media, if not, you can write a letter to the editor, you can pick up a pen, you can put your hands on this, you can make sure that every single one of your friends sees this film and other films that are relevant. So pick up a pen, make sure that you take a role here, join us.
800 people were executed in Iran last year. That's what the UN Rapporteur told us last week on the Hill. Just for saying what they believe in, for not wearing a hijab or a dupatta or whatever. 800 people were executed.
2,000.
Why? 2,000. If they're saying 800, it might be 2,000. Why is there selective outrage? Why didn't people speak up for Mahsa Amini, who had the courage to do what she believed in? Why aren't we talking about the Uyghur women who just had a conference in New York and said, listen to us, we are also Muslim and we're hurting. Why don't we talk about Rohingya women? Do you know, thousands and thousands of them were raped. They are still trafficked and sent to all parts of Asia, but we are just concerned with Israel. That has to stop. This selective outrage has to stop, and we all need to demand that Sima Bahous, who's the UN Women's Chief, has not condemned the violence of Hamas against Israeli women. She doesn't even believe it. She needs to resign, and we must all call for that. My taxpayer dollars and yours cannot go to building tunnels and refusing to acknowledge the pain of women.
I'll keep it short. I think
Yeah, please, everybody.
we need a political and civic engagement home for Muslim Americans that are not anti-Semitic, that are not with the grievance narrative, and that are a counter to CARE and ISNA and ICNA, What's sitting in Washington, D.C. today is a danger. The Muslim-Jewish relations, the history of them in the United States has always been on caveats, and that was on Zionism and the existence of Israel. And so we need to change that. So we need a seat at the table, and we need to be in Washington, D.C.
Be a role model. Show that you can hold multiple truths at the same time. Even if you support Israel, even if you wish the destruction of Hamas, and believe me, I'd love to wake up tomorrow and find Hamas gone. Try your best to think of the humans on the other side. Think of the people of Gaza that are suffering due to circumstances over which they have no control. If you model that, if you exhibit that, you show that you're the better person, even if it's not reciprocated. You do what's right, not expecting something good in return, and I promise you that will plant seeds for transformation.
Thank you. So I have, when I met Rachel Goldberg in Tel Aviv, she told me about her son Hirsch, who had many Muslim friends, but not one person contacted her. And I told her I will remind about her son at any gathering that I come to and I speak at. And so I want you to remember her son. And when I met Amit in DC, I asked her, what is the message you have for the world? She said, talk about us so that people will hear. And my request to you is, there are 650 million Muslims in South Asia. Don't forget that. Don't let the Arab voices take hold of the narratives. So yes, yes, please. This is urgent. This is important. As Zainab said, we need you to amplify our voices. This is hard for us. They call us, we are a step away from a death threat, but we take a step because we are convinced we are not looking for consensus. So I want you, every one of you, to be convicted. Don't look for consensus. Do something. Amplify Muslim women's voices who are from South Asia in particular. Thank you.
3 very practical things. First, share this video with 10 friends. Second, post this video to 5 feminist organizations that have not spoken about this and ask them why that hasn't happened. Third, follow every single organization represented up on this panel that is fighting against global gendered violence.
Well, last in the alphabet, Zipperstein. 2 quick things. 1, demand of your elected representatives that every public school teacher from kindergarten to the UC system be required to watch this film before the school year starts again in September. Number 1. Number 2, let's express our appreciation to our Muslim sisters and brother who displayed incredible courage tonight.
Thank you, everybody, so much. Thank you, Rabbi Barron. Thank you, everybody, and every one of you is so precious. The one thing that I have to leave you with is life is precious.